Welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Osborne, and on this podcast, we interview successful business owners for them to share atomic, impactful lessons that they've learned throughout the course of their business so they can share them with us and we can all learn as well. As always, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way to close deals that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional methods that everyone hates. We use this method to book 26 qualified leads and sales calls in 10 days without any ad spend, outreach, or endless social media posting. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborne, and the link to that will be in the show notes below. But on today's show, our special guest is Corina Goetz. She's the owner of Star Cat, providing training and consultancy to better understand the Gulf region. So, Corina, it's great to have you on the show. And apologies if I mispronounced your last name, but I want to start off by asking you the first question that I always love to ask, which is this: if somehow you were able to get a time machine to go back when you started your very first business, what's the number one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
I think, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah.
And I think it's very much that, you have to trust the process. And that I think very often or certainly at least that was the case for me, as children, you sometimes used to see failure as like failure, when in fact, I think failure is actually so valuable because it gives you all these lessons and you learn and you know what not to do. And there's definitely a reason for it. And so I would definitely say just don't take these failures to heart because they're part of the process and they actually move you forward and they are so super valuable.
Yeah, I love that. I love that perspective. It's the way that I look at stuff as well. Um, when you look at the failures, so to speak, that you have had in your business, I call them more learning opportunities or experiments that we go through in business. But when you look at the course of your business, what's the number one biggest challenge that you faced, and what's the lessons that you learned from that?
I think the biggest challenge initially is that you realize when you have your own business versus if you have ever worked in the corporate world, which I have, is that you become everything. So you're IT, you are like your marketing, you are your sales, you are the face of the business. There's normally, it's not like that you have a big team, especially when you start out. And I think the biggest thing is that you have to get over your fear, like your fear of being seen, what people think of you, what people think when you, for example, show up on social media and they go like, who the hell
Mhm.
is she like, or who the hell is
Yeah.
he? What are they even talking about? Who do they think they are? And it's like, because for every person that thinks that, there's probably 20 more who feel really inspired and they love what you do. But it's so easy. I think we can get, and this is so interesting with social media as well. I think we can get 100 great comments, but we get hung up on the one that is bad. And we think about this for days. So I think,
Yeah.
you have to really learn that I think fear is a good thing and it pushes you forward. And I just give you an example. This kind of very much started very much during COVID. I started doing a lot of podcasts before the first podcast that I was ever on. Oh my God, I couldn't even sleep the night before. And now I'm like, "Phew, this is easy. I'll do any
Mm.
podcast." And I really love it. But it took time to get over that fear. And the same as like public
Yeah.
speaking. I used to hate all of this. And then I got all these opportunities. And I thought, if I don't do this, if I don't put myself out there, nobody else is going to put me out there. So I need to kind of just get over it and do it. And of course you're nervous and that never goes away. But I think you learn that this fear is you have to trust yourself, you have to trust the process, you have to trust that things are going to get better, and you just have to push forward. And then I think, if you then have the right people around you who inspire you, who help you, who you can ask for advice, then the next level. And these are usually not the people that were with you before, because especially if you came from a corporate environment and then you changed and opened up your own business, you need a total different circle, because your old colleagues cannot relate to what you go through. And they will not be, and this is, I'm not saying this to be negative, but they just have different priorities, and that's okay, you know. So you need to find people that have very similar priorities to you, that can help you, give you advice, tell you, oh, do this, maybe do that, speak to this person, reach out to that person, don't worry what this person says. So
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's yeah, it's just different places in life, isn't it? There's a very different mindset that a business owner has to have compared to, someone being employed. It's just a different world, and neither is right nor wrong. It's just very, very different in that for sure. And I love that that example you gave where you couldn't sleep the night before the first podcast you did, and now it is, and podcasts are easy. You just chat and have a conversation. But what are some of the key things that you have learned from that you apply kind of every day in your business now, about dealing with new things or new expansion, or maybe even new challenges in the business that we do sometimes feel a little bit afraid of, or, oh gosh, how are we going to deal with that? How have you applied that learning into what you're doing now?
I think the biggest shift, and this is something that I think you never finish working on, is your mindset. And that, I think, is was the biggest learning curve for me. And I feel like every single challenge that I had prepared me for a bigger one. Because when I look back, and I think, oh my God, I had to go through this in order to come to that conclusion. So it's really, really interesting. And at the time it feels really scary. And not only that, I think we also all have like beliefs that maybe we've had since childhood that we might not even be aware of. And
Yeah.
like for me, I had this, the biggest thing I think for me was I had to really like work on, and this again, I still do this, but I feel I've made a lot of progress, was sort of like my money mindset, because I never really understood why I had this massive need for security. And it almost to a point where it was like, so for example, like one time, like years ago, I was made redundant, and I couldn't even bring myself to tell my parents, and I couldn't understand why. But the fear was so like it consumed me.
Mm.
And I always thought, I just don't understand. Why do I have this? Because I had a lot of friends and they were not like that. And it was very much like I had this thing where I thought, oh my God, I lost this job. I'm going to end up on the street. And I was like, but when you looked at it from like the outside, it was like, come on, like a lot more has to happen before you end up on the street. So I did a lot of work and it was really interesting. So I went to a seminar and I heard somebody speaking there, a guy called Dr. Don Wood, and he basically talked about trauma. And I thought that was so interesting because I thought, I have no trauma. You know, trauma for me was like violence, sexual abuse. What I was like, no, I have none of that. So I have no trauma.
Mhm.
And he said to me, I had a conversation with him afterwards, and he said, no, you're looking at this all wrong. He said, trauma is actually something that you see in high definition. And I was like, oh. And then it
Mm.
suddenly dawned on me where this money issue came from. Because basically, I grew up, when I was a kid, I grew up in East Germany and I was 12 when the wall came down. And basically, what happened was at the time then, like a lot of people in East Germany started losing their jobs. And I remember very vividly, and this is this moment that I 100% have in high definition and I've had for years. I remember my parents talking about, oh my God, all these people are losing their jobs. We're losing our jobs. What are we going to do? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh my God, this is where this money issue comes from.
Mm.
And it never occurred to me before. And again, and you also know that because when you're an entrepreneur and you have your own company, like cash flow, money, this is an ongoing thing that you have to deal
Yeah.
with because not every month is the same. You know, you have to plan ahead and you have to really be really centered in yourself to trust that also more stuff is going to come in, more stuff is going to work out. And that to me was it was the biggest thing that I had to work on this sort of money mindset, to trust myself and come
Mm.
on, like this is, you're gonna be fine. And there's gonna be a lot of other things that have to happen before you're gonna have a problem. So,
Yeah.
but it all led back to this childhood moment that, of course, I subconsciously absorbed as a kid, and I never even knew
Hmm.
that this was that this was the course. So I was like, wow, okay, here we go. Now I know.
Yeah.
I can work on it. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I think if more people could dive into that aspect of their lives, their lives would be so much easier, you know. It's challenging going through it, you know, to look at that trauma and go through it and deal with it and sit with it, and you know, it takes work, but as you said, once you go through that, who you become on the other side is absolutely transformational. And it allows you to expand and allows you to grow and allows you to become the things that you want to become. So I totally agree with that. I mean, I could literally talk to you about this for hours. I love this stuff, but it's so incredibly important. Well, if you look at over the next, let's say 2 to 3 years, Karina, of where you're wanting to go in the business and what your goals are, what are you wanting to achieve?
Well, I actually have some very interesting projects in the pipeline. First of all, I think the most important thing for me is I think you need to have diversification. You cannot just rely on one stream of income. I think you need to look at different ones, and for that, I think you need a personal brand. And there's no better way than to do this than on LinkedIn, because and especially for me, when I look at like the Gulf, so like I look at like Saudi Arabia or the UAE where I've just been, all the people, the Emiratis, the Saudis, they all tell me before we do any projects, before we work with anyone, we look and see what the person's doing on LinkedIn. And I'm like, this is what I've been saying all along. But when I talk to people in the UK, they're like, LinkedIn is kind of like a platform to find a job. I'm like, guys, you really missed the boat here,
Yeah.
because it's so much more. So I think so with that, I think I definitely, want to work some more on like my personal brand and but also bring more knowledge to people, because LinkedIn has been really transformational for me. And yes, of course, I also use other platforms like Instagram and whatever. So I want to
Yeah.
continue working on this. So I have a newsletter, I have a blog that people find really useful. The amount of people that write to me on LinkedIn and say, we feel so inspired because of what you said. About Saudi, we really want to go. And of course, I'd love to like work in some kind of official capacity with some of them, because I think what since Saudi has opened up, it's so exciting, and they have so many incredible places, and the people that I've met out there are just unlike anywhere else. I literally have such a love for not just for Saudi, but for the whole kind of region. So I definitely want to do some more. With that, I have, I have an online course. So I want to reach more people, because I also think this whole region is so misunderstood, and I think more people need to know about it, and they need to open up their mind and stop listening to mainstream media and actually listen to
Mm.
people that have actually been there and
Yeah.
experienced. And I think for that, I'm actually a pretty good example, because I'm a woman. I'm not from there. I don't speak any Arabic. I didn't have any prior exposure to it until, I started working with that region. So I definitely want to do some more. And then I have a very exciting project, which I don't know where this is going to go, but it is very exciting. It has to do with the Middle East, and it also has to do with space, which I know nothing about. And it literally is so far out of my comfort zone. But I think it's so exciting, and I have three really incredible co-founders. So we will see. We had some very preliminary conversations in the Middle East, and it's very exciting because space is a very big component, and it also feeds back into some of my hospitality background. So I think, so we will see. The sky is
Yeah.
the limit, I think. So there's a lot of interesting things happening.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, Karina, for people that are wanting to learn a little bit more about what you do and where to find you, I know you mentioned LinkedIn already, but where's some of the best places for people to get in contact with you on?
I mean, definitely LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. I'm sure you're gonna link my website in the show notes. I do like a weekly blog about all things Middle East. I also have lots of guest bloggers, which is really exciting because there's a lot of different things that, I don't have the answers to everything. So why not have other people that give me more expertise? So that's really cool. So yeah, so the website is star-cat.co.uk. And basically, so the name, I just want to also explain because people say to me, what the hell is this like Star Cat? Is this like some space cat or whatever? And I'm like, no, no. STAR basically stands for 5 star, and CAT is consulting and training. So there is a method behind that name.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I definitely recommend everyone check out Karina on the different places she just said and recommended you find her on. So please do that. Karina, thank you so much for being on the show. And as a reminder for everyone listening, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way to close deals that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional methods that everyone hates. To find out more, send me a direct message on LinkedIn to have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborne, and the link to that will be in the show notes below. And until next episode, stay inspired.